So this week's Parsha is a double Parsha that contains many events and issues dealing with values and important turning points. And today I'm going to spotlight a few of these key topics. It's a double Parsha. Matot, the first one, begins with an in-depth description concerning the laws regarding oaths. The story then continues with the Israelites' battle against Minyan. The chapter closes with the tribes of Reuven and Gad making a request to dwell outside of the land of Israel. In Masei, the tribes of Reuven and Gad promise to help the other tribes settle the land of Israel, even though they will not be living there. God tells Moses exactly where each tribe is to settle, and next, God clarifies the laws regarding murder. Finally, the chapter concludes with the story of the daughters of Zelophehad receiving their rightful inheritance. This week's Parsha is full of meaningful stories and valuable life lessons. When I was doing the research for today's Dvar Torah, on the My Jewish Learning website alone, I found 24 different articles dealing with different themes taken from the Parsha. It is chock full of things. So let's delve in and have a look at a few of the values that can be taken from this week's Parsha and that are still relevant to our time. Let's first consider the value of Kol Israel Arevim Ze Leze, which translates all of the children of Israel are responsible for one another. As a community, we look after one another. We care for the widow and for the orphan. In our day and age, organizations such as Jewish Child and Family Service provide and ensure that no member of our community gets left behind. This same concept is reflected in today's Torah reading and applies to the special request from the tribes of Reuven and Gad, who asked to live outside of the land of Israel on the other side of the Jordan River, so that they can raise their herds instead of crossing into the land. They are only permitted to do so if they pledge to help their brethren settle the land of Israel. We see clearly that the individual tribes are responsible for the greater nation. In modern times, we may find our parnassah, or our livelihood, outside of our community, but we still feel an obligation for contributing to its well-being, be it locally, abroad, or in Israel. Further to our discussion on values, Matot begins with a description of the laws regarding oaths. The Torah discusses the importance of not breaking a pledge, and that one should think carefully before making a verbal commitment, never mind a written commitment. Our good word is considered our most precious possession and is likened in the Torah to a gem such as rubies. The Torah tells us that we are morally obligated to honor our commitments, even and especially when it becomes inconvenient. This is a warning to parents on following through on their promises to their children, but also on children to uphold the promise to behave better. It's a warning to employees to keep their word to their employers, to keep their word to the employees, and vice versa, and to business people of the value of their commitment in their professional relations. You may have heard about the expression bli neder, that people often say when speaking about their plans and projects. Neder means oath or pledge, and bli means without. Bli neder would then mean that one would refrain from making a commitment that one may not be able to keep. Kol nidre comes from the root neder. It refers to all of the oaths and promises we may have made prior to Yom Kippur, which may have not been upheld, and for which we have to answer on the day of judgment, Yom Hadin. Intentions are important, but we also have to follow through on them. Intentions are important in Judaism because they have to do with free will. After the exodus from Egypt, we gained the power to choose our own destiny. After all, only a free people can make plans and carry through on them, or not. Freedom comes with responsibilities. As I said, intentions are important. In Judaism, and this leads to another important value described in this parsha that focuses on the role of intention in differentiating when killing is considered manslaughter and when it's considered murder. The Parsha talks about the establishment of 6 cities of refuge called Ir Miklat. The word miklat today in modern Israel is used for a bomb shelter. And these cities were set aside as permanent asylum, not only for Jewish people, but for anyone dwelling in the land and anybody passing through. Anyone who unintentionally killed another person was permitted to flee to these cities. Once within the walls, the manslayer was protected by law against any revenge or additional punishment. However, the person who intentionally killed would be evicted, tried, and punished. This was different from many of the societies of the time where asylum was offered by local shrines, regardless of intention. The Torah stresses the fact that religion could not get in the way of justice when intention to harm could be proven. So, on the topic of killing, or how we feel about the act of taking a life, how do we grapple with the commandment to wipe out Minyan? I'm sure you noticed that this morning. We learn about the importance of saving a life, referenced in the expression pikuach nefesh, that we must put all other commandments aside to save somebody, such as breaking the Sabbath, for example, to provide first aid. We learn that one who saves a life is as if they have saved the entire universe. Our laws about separating milk and meat are there as a symbol of our discomfort with violence and killing. We care not to mix the milk of the mother, a life source, with the meat of the calf that would have gained sustenance from the milk. These are very powerful images about how we feel about violence and killing. Yet, as Rabbi Joseph Telushkin states in the article entitled Maintaining Monotheism, Matot is a disturbing Torah portion. In depicting the early Hebrews' war with the Midianites, it contains a command to the Hebrews to wipe out most of Midian. It's true that the Hebrews had law pertaining to warfare to help preserve life, such as the law that stated that a city could only be surrounded on 3 sides, allowing deserters to flee on the 4th side, or the laws of preventing the violation of women, looting, and pillaging during warfare. But this talks about the wiping out of the Midianites. This made me uncomfortable. And when I started to prepare for today's Dvar Torah, I was simply going to omit this whole section, to be honest with you. We were at the lake, and I was doing the research, and I kept saying, how can I talk about this? Write it out of my comments and hope you wouldn't notice, but I knew you would. And usually it's on this screen, and you can't help but notice. I personally am so proud of our Jewish heritage, of our values, of our teachings to always prefer peace. The Torah literally says, rodef shalom. You shall chase after shalom. How could I talk to you about this ugly episode in our history that commands the people to wipe out Midian? In an article on the My Jewish Learning website called Coping with Complexity, Sam Shonkoff explains, peace is a misleading translation of the word shalom, for it implies a lack of conflict, an absence of complication, and in fact, the root of shalom is whole. Shalom isn't a state of calm, it's a state of wholeness. It's a process of opening oneself up to the whole story and grappling with it, seeing the struggle with the Torah's most disturbing faces, even when it provokes emotional reactions like shame, anger, sadness, can actually connect us with our deepest values and help us to identify our own ethical orientations and motivate us to take action on these issues. Rabbi Telushkin explains that we should place the commandment to kill in context. One must remember that 3,000 years ago, this is how wars were fought. The main reason these injunctions so disturb us is because the Bible itself has sensitized us to the deep respect of human life. Our social conscience comes from the religion of Moses. Jewish scholars throughout the ages have expressed outrage with this terrible episode and have grappled with it. If you recall, a few weeks ago, we talked about Korach, who was swallowed up by the earth. And even if he had done some bad stuff, the people still didn't like how he was treated. Moses himself is deeply disturbed by this commandment and orders the warriors to purify themselves after the battle and remain outside the camp. Rabbi Tulushkin explains that the Bible's troubling ethics on warfare can perhaps be best explained in the terms of monotheism's struggle to survive. Had the Hebrews continued to reside among the pagan, child-sacrificing Canaanites, and this is something we sometimes forget, monotheism itself could certainly have died out. What can we learn from today's Torah portion is that it is healthy to address the uncomfortable issues in our lives and not shy away from them. The fact that the rabbis grappled with these stories and topics helped Judaism evolve into the religion it is today. If we have survived as a people, it is most certainly because we have been able to struggle with ourselves and our own faith, to constantly do better and be better. It's in our nature. It's in our name. He who struggles with God, Israel. I wish you a good Shabbos. Thank you.